Tonight, Palm Springs Mayor Pro Tem Christy Holstege is standing by her recent letter about racist policies and policing in the Coachella Valley, despite the backlash from police. I spoke with Christy today to see if she had any specific examples. Christy, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Let me start by asking you about the letter you wrote earlier this month to the Riverside County Board of Supervisors. In it, you write, like most communities throughout Riverside County, in Palm Springs and the Coachella Valley, we have a long history of racial segregation and exclusion, racial violence, racist city policies and policing, and injustice and disparities in our communities that exist today. Do you really believe that? And if so, what specific examples can you provide to back up those words?
Sure. So I made a general statement about the history of racism and segregation in our city and how those impacts are still felt by residents today. I think our history as a community, that we have an incredible community, civil rights and equality for all is in our mission statement. We have had openly racist mayors in the past. We have a history of Section 14 being burned down and people being removed from their homes and having to flee to other places in the city where those communities and families still live today. We have a long history of those incidents, which, are just facts that we have to address as a cities and we need to really account for so that we can move forward together as a community.
Last night on this program, I interviewed Palm Springs Police Chief Brian Reyes, and I asked him this question. Are there any examples or concrete evidence of racist policing that you can think of in the Coachella Valley?
No, to be honest, no. And anytime it's brought to our attention, whether real or perceived, we have an obligation to investigate and look into those matters. We do not tolerate that.
So is he wrong?
I watched the whole segment from our police chief, Brian Reyes. I thought he did an incredible job, and I support our police chief and our police department, and I agree with his statements. But Palm Springs and the city, we're not experts about how racism and systemic racism, we're talking about racism in our institutions that were built 60 80 years ago when the city was founded. And so we're moving forward on listening sessions as a city so that we can really hear from residents who are affected about what impacts racism has had in their daily lives. And I think we'll learn a lot through those listening sessions about incidents, about racism, about systemic problems that exist today.
So then going back to your words where you specifically say racist policing, and I don't think you've provided any examples, are you backtracking on those words?
I stand by my statement. It was a general statement about our history as a community. I think those facts are undeniable. If you Google it, you'll find lots of examples in our communities. And so that's a statement about, where we come from and where we need to move forward from. It's not a statement about where we are today as a police force or as a department. I know our communities work very closely with our police department. We're really held out as a model. You've seen a lot of protests happening in Palm Springs, in part because our policing is so community oriented. But to deny that racism exists in any city department, I think is just, is difficult to justify when we don't know all of the facts, and we just need to work together to hear out the community and impacted communities so that we can improve all of our practices in every department. We should always want to address those issues and move forward to create a better history.
Let's now talk about what's happening with you and the police union. The union took offense to your words and wrote that if racist policing were in fact the case, you and every city council person has a responsibility to fire each and every one of our officers. The union writes that you instead stood by allowing these perceived racist ideologies within our city and department to continue. They add, not one suggestion of reform has been brought forward by you or any other council member. Your response to that?
I was a bit shocked by the union's response and about the history of Palm Springs, which is undeniable. We've racial justice in our communities. We moved to districts so that we can have minority majority districts and better representation in city government. We worked with the union to move forward on the ability to have body cameras for our police force, which most other departments in the Coachella Valley have. So, it's not true to say we haven't been working on these issues since day one. For the 2.5 years that I've served on city council, I've worked on these issues, and our council has as a whole.
And you also wrote a response to the police union.
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
My response was just that we need to come together as a community. We need to hear out our residents. We all need to work together. We're on the same side here. So, to see it being pitted, one person or one group against another is just not the case. We have an incredible community. We need to all work together to be on the same side, to improve all of our city policies and address our past.
What has been the reaction, Christy, from the community to what you wrote?
Overall, it's been incredibly supportive. Residents are calling on us to address the history of discrimination in our city, to address our policies that might have disparate impacts on communities of color, and to talk about reform measures or, different policies that we can make sure that we're following best practices of what our residents are demanding. And so, my job is to represent our residents and to push forward, what they want to see in their city government, and I'm proud to continue to do that.
Obviously, there's a lot of talk right now nationwide about possibly defunding police departments. Do you support defunding the police?
It's interesting. People are calling it defunding. We have gotten a number of letters from residents on both sides of that, calling for defunding and calling, for continuation of all of our police services. I think that we should take a hard look about what our investments are in our police department. Our police today are expected to be social workers, homeless experts, mental health experts. They're code enforcement. If you look at the scope of activities that our police are required to do today, it's a lot of work, and they're not always funded and well equipped to do that work, especially on homelessness. So I do support looking and seeing what we're spending and requiring our police force to do, and if those are effective tools. For example, we found that criminalizing homelessness is not effective. We have worked in our Palm Springs Police Department and as a city to instead have crisis response workers who are trained in behavioral health, who can give referrals to housing. So I think that we should have those conversations as a community. What are better models to solve some of our societal issues as a city? And what's the role of the police department in doing that?
All right, certainly a lot of important conversations are going to be happening very soon. Christy, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.